More than 1 billion people around the world rely on food from the ocean as their primary source of protein. But that's changing as the planet's oceans become more polluted. This week, thousands of government, scientific, business, and civic leaders met in New York to mobilize and demand action to stop the decline of our planet's oceans. VOA UN correspondent Margaret Besheer has our report.
Pollution, plastics, overfishing. The world's oceans are getting increasingly unhealthy, and man has a lot to do with it.
The ocean is indeed trouble. It's not stuff that's been occurring naturally. All of these problems are created anthropogenically, and so it's for us to find the solutions to them.
Climate change is also making the ocean sick. As the planet warms, more carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere, and the ocean absorbs it. This turns its waters more acidic, harming marine life, especially shellfish and coral reefs. Add in weather trends such as El Niño, and some marine life migrate elsewhere, taking the livelihoods of fishermen with them. 2/3 of the global tuna catch comes from the Pacific Islands. But in 2016, the fish followed warmer currents eastward, away from their traditional fishing grounds near Palau and Papua New Guinea. This also made the tuna vulnerable to illegal fishing and cost the islands more than $600 million in lost revenue.
And to explain the UN mandate to save the world's oceans, we are joined by VOA UN correspondent Margaret Besheer, who filed that report for us. You've been covering this event all week, Margaret, this week-long event in New York. So what was your takeaway? What was your sense of how bad the problem is for the world's oceans?
Well, the problem is bad, Mill, and we're killing the ocean. Basically, we're killing the ocean, and these are our weapons of choice. We have plastic cutlery, straws, plastic shopping bags, and beverage bottles. And these are really affecting the ocean and ruining the ecosystem of the ocean. And 8 million tons of plastics are going into the ocean each year. And guess what? The fish are ingesting them. And then we ingest the fish. So it's a bad cycle. So we had world leaders here this week. We had about 30 heads of state and government. We had ministers of environment and maritime affairs. We had business leaders, scientific leaders. It was really a very unprecedented gathering for the UN. And so the good news is, how are we going to fix the problem?
Yeah, how are we going to fix the problem?
Okay, so number one, prevention. Don't get your reusable, don't get your plastic grocery bags and your cutlery. Think twice about it. Use your reusable water bottle instead of a plastic one. We can all make small measures in our life to keep the plastic out of the ocean in the first place. And the second thing is, let the plastics producers be part of the solution. Let them help innovate eco-friendly packaging for items so that we won't have this amount of plastic going into the sea. And then today we're having more than 1,000 voluntary commitments. Everyone who's here is signing this great call to action, and it's a pledge to take action to protect marine environment, to protect the sea, to prevent pollution, to implement climate change measures, to mitigate the effects of climate change on the ocean. So there's a big call to action. But it's been a really interesting conference, and it's also really put the spotlight. I mean, I don't think I knew the problem was this bad a week ago. And now I'm really going to think twice before I buy a bottle of water like this. We all can do our part.
Yeah, no, we all can do our part. And obviously governments can do a lot more as well collectively. But given what you said about climate change, how much of a worry was it that President Trump decided to pull the United States out of the Paris Accord? Is that a source of consternation among the delegates who attended this conference?
Sure, and they're upset about it, no doubt. But one of the ambassadors had a really good point. He said, look, the glass is still half full. Just because the United States pulled out doesn't mean it's half empty. Look at all the other countries who are still there, the rest of the world virtually. So just because one left doesn't mean that it's going to fall apart. So I think people are very focused on what they can do. They're also very encouraged that Americans as a people are supportive of the climate change agreement, and that local governments, state governments, and business are supporting it. So that's very important.
Obviously, there is a greater sense of urgency that something needs to be done. Is there any optimism at all among the delegates that something can and will be done about it? I mean, are they hopeful?
Yes, definitely. And things are already being done. That's the great part. Countries came here and said what they're doing. So, for instance, Indonesia, second biggest plastics polluter in the world. Gorgeous beaches in Bali. Well, they've realized it makes good economic sense to keep the ocean clean because the tourists aren't going to come to a filthy plastics and polluted beach. So they've already done legislation and such to improve the sea and to ban plastics and to cut back on it.
Margaret,
so countries are realizing it has a dual benefit.
Margaret, I thank you for raising awareness on this issue. It's a very important one, so thanks for that report. And thanks, obviously, to all our correspondents today. That is our show. But we hope you'll join us again next week for another edition of The Correspondents. In the meantime, stay up to date with the latest news at voanews.com. And please do check out our shows there. Just click on the Programs tab on the upper right of our homepage. We're also on Facebook and YouTube at VOA The Correspondents. Thanks for watching. I'm Bill Arcega. So long from Washington.